Hello, and welcome to this episode of The Dynamic Entrepreneurs. I'm super excited. I'm Jenny Edwards, your host, and I'd like to ask you all out there, what do you get when you cross a veteran divorce attorney, a psychologist, and a rabbi? You get the radical rabbi. Welcome, Emily Brenner. Hello.
Hello, I'm so excited to be here, Jenny.
Yay! So happy to have you here. Well, I was really excited to invite you on this episode of The Dynamic Entrepreneurs about monetizing your message because you have a very, very unique message. And I know when we met at the New Media Summit, I was particularly impressed by you sharing your story very dynamically because you're not only dynamic, but you're radical.
Woo!
So that's really awesome. And I can't wait for you to share your story. And I just wanted to let our audience know if you are excited about learning how to monetize your message, you should definitely tune in. Stay tuned for what Emily's going to be sharing and what created even more transformation for her. Because, actually, Emily, why don't you tell us a little bit more about your business? Because I know you mentioned that you help people that are on their psycho-spiritual journey, which, that sounds pretty amazing, so
It
that they
is pretty
can
amazing.
really create more freedom and more purpose and self-empowerment and also authenticity. So tell us a little bit more about what you do.
All right. Well, um, as you've already said, I am a divorce and family lawyer and a counseling psychologist and a rabbi. I'm going to give you a little piece of my story so that I can give you an idea of what I want to do. But to set up the story so you'll know where it's going, right now I am concentrating on a very specific place that a lot of people are on their journey, and that's people who are post-divorce or post-separation, and they're having to co-parent with a very high conflict spouse. So I'm not going to go to the extreme beauty of my overall message and long-term message, because what we're doing here today is learning about how to monetize a spiritual message. And the first thing that we learn the hard way is that we have to find a niche that we can help and market to that niche. So obviously, as a divorce lawyer and a very, very seasoned one, and a counseling psychologist and a rabbi, and through the course of all those trainings, I've been a chaplain and a spiritual director and so many things, a guardian ad litem for the children. I have a particular program that stems from my story. So you want to hear the story?
Yes.
All
And
right.
before you start the story, I just want to also mention, why am I wearing this hat? Because as I was learning about Emily's story, I was thinking, from a brand archetype standpoint, she has a lot of qualities of an explorer. Arr.
Absolutely.
Not necessarily a pirate, but definitely an explorer because she's been on quite a journey. So tell us more about your story.
Well, I'm going to tell you, I have to tell you snippets because I'm 66 years old and it could take me maybe 100 years to tell my whole story. And that's a really, really long time for our listeners out there today. And I don't know what they'll learn. So I'm going to just
We only
concentrate
have
on a
30
tiny
minutes.
one. But I do want to add within my credentials that as a rabbi, obviously maybe it shouldn't be obvious anymore, but I'm very, very Jewish, and my training is Jewish and mystical out of the Hasidic tradition. But my degree in counseling psychology is from a Christian school, a very, very religious Christian school. So the inquiry has always been a spiritual inquiry, no matter what I've been learning, to keep that spiritual piece in. So let's go to my story, and I'm going to show you how that spiritual piece works. And it's a tiny piece of a story, but a very dramatic one. So I had a ranch in southern Colorado, and I loved that ranch. I loved every inch of that beautiful piece of desert. It overlooked the Sangre de Cristo Mountains. It was on the high desert chaparral. It was truly a magical place. It was a place where, when you'd walk along the ancient riverbed that went through part of the uninhabited areas, and you turned like sharply around the rock cliffs, for just a moment, you could see the ghosts of Indian children and Native women washing their clothes on the riverbank and children playing. Honestly, it was one of those kind of very magical places. And that's
Wow.
where I was doing what I felt was going to be the culmination of my life's work. And that was exploring the relationship between holiness, which is a big topic that we can talk about, but sustainability, and the food system, and growing food, and care of the land, being a steward of the land. And it was a dream for me, an absolute dream, and I invested most of my life savings in it. And I had a congregation there, and I had a partner. And my partner was a man that I admired, and um, he and I did this together, and he was another rabbi, and I trusted him very much. And that was it. I was set for life. I mean, I was living the dream, right? It was just glorious. And lo and behold, one day it was gone. He was gone, the money was gone, the possibility of keeping the ranch was gone, and it was a disaster. To me, my life was over. I felt like I describe it this way: fingers in the mouth, fetal position,
Hmm.
you know, or maybe a rabbit in a rainstorm. I mean, I felt absolutely like I had no skin. It was the most horrible feeling I could ever hope to tell you about. And I'm willing to bet that a bunch of you out there listening have been in that place where it just like, your world collapses and there's no rhyme or reason to it. I call it God's spin dry cycle, but other people have different ways. But that's what it feels like. But anyway, so here's what happened in the life of a radical rabbi. I was sitting by the window, with the glorious morning light flowing in, and I was doing what a rabbi does in the morning. I was saying my morning prayers, and it's a devotional time. And I was deep in thought and study. And I was reading the portion. We rabbis, Jewish people, read a portion of the Old Testament every week. And I was reading the portion of the week. And it was this story. Um, the Hebrews had just left the land of Egypt. They had just been liberated by the 10 great plagues and the miracles, and they had left, and it was like they were slaves there. And now, Moses, our big archetype for was bringing them out of slavery, right? Bringing them out of their slavery in Egypt. And one of the things, since we're talking archetypes, that I want to tell you is that in the ancient Hebrew language, the word for Egypt is Mitzrayim, which means the narrow places, the constricted places. Do you see how that can relate to a psycho-spiritual journey? So we're leaving there, and it's a kind of birth. And the people go on a couple of journey stops, and they get to a place called Etam. Etam means together with you. And they have a straight shot to the promised land. And God looks down and says, they're not ready. They're just not ready. I have to do something about this to mature them spiritually and emotionally. And he sends them to another place. It's the fourth stop on the journey out of Mitzrayim, to a place called Pi HaChirut, which means a mouth of free choice. starting to see where this is going. And God tells them to sit between essentially a rock and a hard place. He has them sit between Migdol, which is a symbol for our God, and Balzaphon, which is the god of the place, and tells them to contemplate the sea. And yes, that's the famous sea that we're soon going to see split by the wonderful miracle that we've seen Cecil B. DeMille portray for all of us in the stories of the great Exodus. But right now they're sitting there and they don't know that the sea is going to split. They're sitting there, and what happens? They turn around and they see all of Egypt coming at them. And it raises the question, is it all of Egypt, or is it just chariots and armies, or is it their whole past? Their past of slavery that's coming after them. But at any rate, a man steps forward and says to Moses, "Did you take us out to this desert to die? Were there not enough graves in Egypt?" At that moment, as I read that, I started to cry. And I became very angry at God. And I said through my tears, "This is me. This is Elisheva." That's my Hebrew name. As a rabbi, I'm Rabbi Elisheva. I said, "It's Elisheva. Did you bring me out to this effing desert to die?" And I did say effing in front of my God, who I love and revere. So he has to cut me some slack on that one. But I said, "Did you bring me out to this desert to die? Did I not give you my everything? Everything that I had, my life, my dreams, my children, my career as a successful attorney in Atlanta, my hopes, these best years of my life, my trust, everything. And this is the reward? This is what you give me in return?" And a voice came to me at that point. And it was not even a still small voice, Jenny. It was a pretty darn powerful voice. And no, I'm not schizophrenic. I don't think so. And the voice said, "Elisheva, you didn't give me your anything. I gave you the bus fare." Whoa. Whoops. My earphones are falling off. That's what I call a divine reframe. I'm here talking to God, and I get turned 180. What do you mean you gave me the bus fare? You mean everything that I worked for all those years and put away and saved, and 10 years of study and working to be here, and everything that I've built here, all of that was to get me to this place? That was the bus fare to get here, broken and empty and cleaned out on a deck in front of a desert in Pueblo, Colorado? Are you kidding me?
I just want to stop you right there and ask our audience, where have you had either a divine intervention like that, a voice, an internal voice, or something, some sharing a reframe for how you can look at another perspective of what's going on in your life? Because I know a lot of times we get stuck in these, patterns of our brain and thinking about things the same way that we always have, until there's some added feedback about how we could actually reframe it, right?
And I was lucky that came to me in my spiritual prayer space. And that's very much a part of my story as a human being, is my sense of the divine, which I call God. And it's a very, kind of conventional, but yet very mystical view of God. My God is not, an old man with a white beard on a throne with a scepter or anything like that. It's very much a mystical and energetic uh, Godhead that I feel connected to, but I do feel very connected and very guided by it. And that reframe was tremendous to me. So I kept reading, and that's what launched the Radical Rabbi, because I'll tell you what happened. I didn't know that it did at the time, but it did. So Moses says to God, you remember the man said, "Were there not enough graves in Egypt?" So Moses looks at God and says, what am I supposed to tell this guy? And God gives a 5-step plan that to me is the most ingenious 5-step process piece ever. And you kind of have to understand the ancient language to really get it. So I'm going to share it with you and I'm going to share it with you lovingly, because everybody should know this. Okay. I think. Is that okay? I mean, because you and I've
Absolutely.
talked
Bring it
about this
on.
in your journey. All right. Well, the first thing God says is don't be afraid, but he uses a kind of afraid, the word for afraid, that's like primary process, fight, flight, or freeze afraid. You know, cockroaches running around the minute the light comes on, kind of afraid. Exactly the kind of afraid that I was when I felt like the rabbit in the rainstorm. I mean, where you feel kind of a chill go down your back, your heart is racing, your body is, ready. You can't tell the difference between, if a Tyrannosaurus Rex is going to eat you for lunch or the phone is ringing. That's that kind of fear. And that's what happens when you look at a sea in front of you and you turn around and you see the army of a whole nation coming after you, right? You feel like if I turn one way, I drown, turn the other way, I get killed, I get, knifed in the front or speared or whatever. And I think a lot of us find ourselves in that position. So what did God say to do? Don't get off, fight, flight, or freeze. That's number one. Second one, he says, tityatzvu, which means gather yourselves. Gather yourself. It's a kind of self-gathering. And to me, that's where we let our inner witness arise, that kind of gathered place where we take the locus of our fear and the response to the fear, and we're able to move it from the outside where you're saying, oh, God, make me a miracle, or court, send me an order, or call the police, to an internal place. And it's a major spiritual step to move from looking for the power on the outside to help you to being willing to find the power on the inside to help you. And there is a kind of gathering, there's a centering, I guess people might say. But I like the
Grounding.
idea of it
Grounding
being
too.
called gathering. Yeah, because it's grounding, and it's also going all the way up to the heavens. It's really standing there as an axis mundi, as yourself, right? You become a portal, to anything possible in that place. So the next step is look at what's really there. But it's not just look at what's really there, but when you look at what's really there, also see the salvation of God with you. So let's move that to modern terms. It's something that you and I've talked about before, that in part of your assessment, don't forget to take into your account the fact that you're in the midst of a process, and that there is a process. And somewhere in this process, if you leave the assessment part open, assessment is going to be a process. It's not just the immediate assessment for what's the next best thing for me to do, but it's also the assessment of your life. There's a gift in here somewhere.
Yeah.
This is a place where you're going to want to reframe. This is where the work of reframing, of developing what I call holy curiosity, of looking at this as the start of an adventure. All right. And then you come to the next part, the fourth thing, which doesn't even have a translation in English. It's tacharishun. You be in your maximum equanimity. And it really is the equivalent of letting go of attachment to the outcome. And that's something that, I know in your own story, you bring up, Jenny, that you had to let go of attachment to the outcome. And what I tell everyone is there is no such thing as the outcome, right? That's like saying the winner in the game of business, right? In your entrepreneurship, it's not a closed game, it's an open game. It's not a zero sum, like you're having a problem and there's the outcome. There's not. Life is going to keep going on and on and on. A new next thing is going to happen. And if you are not frozen, if you're unfrozen and can allow, if you can muster that holy curiosity to allow different possibilities in the future, then you'll dance with life. Otherwise, you'll be stuck. If you think there is the outcome to attach to, you are stuck. So that's a mind space. That's actually a mind space, and it's a very difficult thing. These 4 steps are life practice.
Yeah,
And then
absolutely.
and the next step is do the next right thing, go. And I always say that we can hear these with our mind. We can learn them with our mind. And when all of that is said and done, you still don't know them, because these are process steps. And by that, I mean, these are things that are the result of a spiritually based practice, an energy based practice that moves you to making a new pathway between your brain and your body. You know, you're really opening a new thing on an energetic level. And I'm not being woo-woo when I say that. I'm speaking about neuroscience and the ability to unhijack your emotional to unhijack your rational brain, which is basically hijacked by your subconscious mind when you're in that kind of panicked state. So I saw this and I worked on it, and I made a program for myself because I do have very deep faith, and I felt that those 5 steps, it seemed to me that even sitting in that place, um, those 5 steps seemed to me a passage. And it was those 5 steps, following them, that made the C part. It gave them a miracle. And here's something, one step that I want to say is, after hearing this with their minds, the people still complained to Moses. Tell God to make us a miracle. Tell God to make us a miracle. And God looks down and he says, why are they complaining to me? Why are they whining to me? Somebody there has to do something. And the rabbinical stories say that, you know, it was one man, Nachshon ben Aminadab, he was the prince of Judah, who actually walked forward and went into the sea, said, hey, somebody's got to assume some leadership here. Somebody's got to do something. And it was when he did something that the miracle could happen. Right? So there was a correlation.
Take action.
It was, yeah. So the action helped. So it was this. So when you want miracles to happen in your life, you need to work with God. If you want God to work with you, we need to make this happen. And it takes as long as it takes. It took me about 6 months to go from step 1 to step 2, to get out of total primary process. I had to figure out how to do it. I bought a biofeedback monitor to get myself into the meditation zone that I wanted, and trained myself with that and heart math, and worked on all kinds of things. And lo and behold, so we talk about a psycho-spiritual journey. I came back to Atlanta, Georgia, and just I don't want to emphasize how much, as the radical rabbi, I have weird miracles happening all the time in my life. I come back, I get back to Atlanta. I'm at my mother's house, because I don't have really any place to go. And my brother asked me about networking. And this is like a Monday afternoon. I get in and I show him that down the street, there's a place to go network at 7 o'clock in the morning or 6:45 in the morning. And I'll meet him there Thursday morning and show him how to do it. And he doesn't show up, but I'm there, fresh, still in my not such a great place, right? And I don't know what I'm going to do with myself. And I swear that the next story that I tell you is true. I um so it came my like 45 seconds, you know, to stand up and introduce myself to the group. And I said, hi, I wasn't even used to being called Emily anymore. I was like Elisheva still, constantly. I was Rabbi Ellie. But I said, I'm Emily Brenner. I'm newly back from Colorado. I'm a rabbi, a psychologist, and I'm a lawyer. I'm a lawyer. Um, I don't know what I'm going to do with myself yet. I don't have a card. But if anybody has any ideas for me, just come up to me after the group. And I didn't think anything would happen. Well, Jenny, let me just tell you how God works in my life. A woman came up to me who is a very wonderful divorce lawyer in Atlanta, Georgia. And she said, are you licensed in Georgia? I said, yeah. And you're in psych license too? I said, yeah. She said, listen, I have a strange case. It's involving 2 Orthodox Jewish people who are going through a very ugly divorce. And I have a guardian ad litem. That's a person that's assigned by the courts to figure out what's in the best interest of the children. And I don't like what she's doing. I need somebody who's going to be able to bust the guardian ad litem's report. And I just haven't been able to figure out how to do it, because I need somebody who's a lawyer, a psychologist, and a rabbi to be able to get behind this as an expert. And I said, "Are you kidding?" And she said to me, how much would you charge to come into this case? And I said, "Well, I don't know." And here I've been in Pueblo with very poor people and, kind of out of it for a few years. And I'm thinking, how much could I get away with asking for? I was going to ask for like $500 to $1,000. And to me, that was like in my wildest imagination. She said, "But before you tell me yours, I should tell you that I'm not authorized by my client to go above $5,000 for this first eh, set, of eyes on the case." And I said, "Well, I can do it for that." Anyway, to make a extremely long story a little bit shorter, that was how I wound up in family law. And again, after these years, and wound up going through and figuring out that as a family lawyer, more often than not, I feel like I'm substituting one set of problems for another. And the kind of holistic view that I have of life made me want to do something different with these people. And so I again have another like round the mountain, and now I'm the radical rabbi. And this program that worked so well for me, the 5 steps program, I've combined with modern neuropsychology, modern psychology, and some good, like amazing psychospiritual work to create what I think is the best program out there uh, if you are co-parenting with a high conflict ex. And I call that DAMN, which stands for disengage, assess, manage, nurture. And I called it that because I think it's helpful to get a little bit angry when you're upset. It kind of lifts your energy up. So I'm giving people an innocent, naughty thing to do, but it's really based in what I call God's 5-step program for overcoming absolutely anything, that ultimately I'll get into selling when it doesn't have to be in a little niche. So that's been a very long answer to your very concise question, but it's an accurate answer because that's how I'm monetizing it. I'm monetizing it by creating a course that people will see, hopefully the visibility of your wonderful summit, of this interview, of the interviews that we'll be doing on the Radical Rabbi.
How do
Um,
people access it? How do people find out more about your program, your course?
Well, you can go to www.theradicalrabbi.com and check it out. But as soon as we launch, which is going to be very, very soon, you will get the usual bombardment of emails and offers and opt-ins so to help people know and learn. I am going to ask you, though, if you are listening to this and you think that's something that somebody you know needs, please let them know. And will you be putting information on show notes?
Mm. Yeah,
You will.
I'll have the URL on the screen also and in the email that goes
So
out.
that's great because Jenny, what you're doing is going to open the doors for so many people, whatever their niche, because you're interviewing not just me, but others, I understand, on a summit that's coming up where you're really going to be giving people lots and lots of tools. And I think that's great. And, the pirate hat aside, I think,
Arr.
yeah, are like as in you are whatever you want to be. How's that?
Thank you. Thank you for sharing your transformation and the steps that really led you to be where you are today. Because I think, as you know, for any of you watching that haven't clearly defined what your hero's journey story is, what led you to be an expert in your field, in your industry, there's so many important points about the not only, like Emily was talking about, the calling. She had that divine reframe that led her to the next step of her path, and having that calling that creates the action to actually move forward, to go for it. And I appreciate you sharing all of these steps, these 5 steps, with our listeners as they look at their own story and how they could clearly define some other points about their own journey and what's most important to them to share, because that is really vital for us all to look at our own message and how we can connect with our audience, our prospective clients, or whoever we are serving, to share our gifts and our talents in a bigger way in the world, to make a bigger impact. As you look at, monetizing your message, but also kind of coming from a giver's gain mentality of giving added value to your audience and sharing your transformation.
Well, I appreciate that and what you're doing. And I think um, I can't say enough about the fact that we now have the web to go on, that we now have this way of being able to talk to millions of people at the same time. Because, and that's one of the things I want to say also about monetizing the message, is that you don't have to charge a ton of money. I mean, as a divorce lawyer, I'm really expensive. I mean, it's going to cost you, quite a few zeros on the left side of the decimal point to come in and see me. I always say about that decimal point and the zeros, it shows you what a whole lot of nothing really can do a lot, right? When you're moving your decimal point. But why do that when you can have a first level where you can come in, because there's such an economy of scales? So for me, I look at this course as my legacy. It's part of my legacy that's the sum total of, oh my God, I can't even tell you how many years of intense training and work, and you couldn't get it anyplace else. But no one else can be me, just like no one else can be you. And so this is like my gift to the world, that makes all of the hard things, all the setbacks, all the divine slaps upside the head with a 2x4, all of those things that are part of, like, the hard knocks of life. It makes them all gifts. That's where I saw the salvation of God. So, in my step 3. So I'm very excited to share that.
Awesome. Well, we greatly appreciate your time today, Emily. And for all of you watching, definitely go to www.radicalrabbi.com.
No, the radical.
The radicalrabbi.com.
And I wasn't being conceited. Just plain radical rabbi was already taken. I want to clear that
okay.
up.
Well, we'll be sure to have the URL on the screen.
Yeah.
And then you can all check out her course and share it with someone that can use that if that speaks to you and your journey as well. So I just adore you, and I'm so happy that we got to spend this time together, Emily. And
me too, Jen.
I wish you many blessings on the next stage of your journey.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.